Coming up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon, 6 world powers and Iran agree to a framework for a final deal on Tehran's nuclear program. US President Barack Obama hails the agreement, saying it will prevent Iran developing a nuclear bomb. US House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi says she hopes Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will apologize for Tokyo's past wartime atrocities when he visits Washington later this month. Plus, Al-Shabab gunmen attack a university campus in eastern Kenya, killing nearly 150 people. It marks the deadliest attack on Kenyan soil since 1998. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's noon Friday, April 3rd here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon, the bitter and more than decade-long standoff between the West and Iran over Tehran's nuclear program could be soon reaching an end.
This after Iran and the 6 world powers agreed to a framework for a deal to curb Iran's nuclear development in return for the lifting of international sanctions.
The parties will attempt to iron out the details and reach a final agreement by the end of June. Chae-sun reports.
After 8 days of marathon negotiations in Switzerland, Iran and the so-called P5+1 nations agreed to a framework for a deal to curb Tehran's nuclear development program. It's not a final deal, but a significant step towards extending the time it would take Iran to build a nuclear weapon by at least 10 years.
Iran will be able to continue its peaceful nuclear program, but there will be limitations placed on the level and the duration of its enrichment program and the quantity of enriched material that can be kept.
Under the framework, Tehran has agreed to suspend 2/3 of its centrifuges that can be used to produce weapons-grade uranium. It will also dismantle a plutonium-producing reactor and allow international inspectors to monitor all of its nuclear facilities on a regular basis. The U.S. and the European Union's economic and financial sanctions concerning Tehran's nuclear activities will be lifted in phases, but will be reinforced if Tehran breaks its commitments. Iran and the 5 UN Security Council permanent members plus Germany are now tasked with reaching a final agreement by June 30th, after which international sanctions relief will start.
And I am convinced that if this framework leads to a final comprehensive deal, it will make our country, our allies, and our world safer.
While the West and the UN chief welcomed the news, Israel, a strong opponent of Iran's nuclear program, said any deal must significantly roll back Iran's nuclear capabilities. The leaders of the U.S. and Iran face another hurdle at home, as the final agreement is viewed with skepticism by many lawmakers in Washington and Tehran. 최유선, Arirang News.
Now, the nuclear deal with Iran would have been unthinkable even a few years ago, so there's renewed optimism that a similar agreement could be reached with North Korea. But how plausible is this?
Well, experts in the US say the chances are slim to none, at least for the time being. Our Park Ji-won tells us more.
Former U.S. nuclear negotiator Robert Gallucci, who led the 1994 Geneva Agreement with North Korea, says it's unlikely the U.S. will engage in more nuclear discussions with Pyongyang in the near future. He said the Obama administration will need to focus on persuading the Republican-led Congress to approve the nuclear framework deal with Iran. His view is widely shared with North Korea experts in the U.S. Joel Witt, a founder and editor at 38 North, a website specializing in North Korea matters, also said he doesn't expect the Obama administration to refocus its attention on Pyongyang anytime soon. Witt says the U.S. has a lot more to do to implement the Iranian deal, such as bolstering its security ties with Israel. And since there are a lot of critics of the Iran deal on the grounds that the U.S. wasted years attempting to convince North Korea to denuclearize, experts say Washington will be reluctant to re-engage with Pyongyang for the time being. Despite bilateral and multilateral negotiations stretching back to the 1990s, North Korea has continuously strengthened its nuclear capabilities, conducting 3 nuclear tests between 2006 and 2013. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The top nuclear envoys from the United States and Russia met in Moscow on Thursday for discussions on the long-stalled 6-party talks on North Korea's denuclearization. Russia's foreign ministry said Sung Kim and Igor Morgulov talked about ways to restart the multilateral dialogue. Russia says it wants to get back to the negotiating table to ease political and military tensions on the Korean peninsula. The ministry, however, gave no further details on the closed-door meeting. It marked the first time since he became the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea policy that Sung Kim visited Russia or met with a high-ranking Russian official. While speculation continues over the possible deployment of the U.S. defense system known as THAAD, it's looking very likely that Korea will be beefing up its own defense capabilities by buying hundreds of advanced missiles from the U.S. Connie Kim has the details.
On Thursday, the U.S. State Department approved a possible sale of 400 air-to-surface Hellfire missiles as well as related equipment to South Korea. Seoul had requested semi-active laser missiles, air training missiles, and captive air training missiles. It is now waiting for the U.S. Congress to approve the purchase. The advanced weaponry will improve South Korea's ability to defend itself against North Korea. These new weapons, coming at a price tag of $81 million, will be used on Apache helicopters, and 36 of which are expected to arrive in South Korea next year. Hellfire missiles are mainly used to target tanks and armored vehicles. It's estimated that Pyongyang possesses about 3,800 tanks, while Seoul has some 2,400. What's more, experts say the Hellfire missiles are also capable of destroying North Korean underground tunnels located on the truce line between the two countries. And inside the tunnels, Pyongyang is estimated to have some 3.4 million long-range artillery projectiles aimed at the southern part of the peninsula. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
North Korea is demanding a wage hike for its workers at the Kaesong Industrial Complex, starting with their pay for March. South Korea says the issue must be settled through talks and reiterated that the companies must refrain from giving in to Pyongyang's demands. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Following North Korea's demand for a wage hike for its workers at the Kaesong Industrial Complex, starting with their pay for March, South Korea has reiterated the issue must be settled through government-level talks.
Since April 10th is the payday, we are trying to arrange a meeting between the Kaesong Industrial District Management Committee and the North Korean government.
North Korea wants the workers' monthly wage raised from $70.30 to $74, which exceeds the current 5% salary cap. On Thursday, the South Korean government asked companies at the Joint Business Park for a wage freeze until a deal is reached between the two Koreas. The Unification Ministry reassured on Friday that the firms will be compensated for any potential damage to their business operations.
For any companies that are affected by following the government's wage guideline, we will review all cases and come up with a measure to minimize the damage, including the distribution of insurance payments.
The Kaesong Industrial Complex, where more than 54,000 North Koreans work at 124 South Korean companies, is the last remaining form of inter-Korean cooperation. The latest tug-of-war between the Koreas is raising concerns about another unilateral shutdown of the complex by Pyongyang. But most experts say such a scenario is unlikely, since maintaining the joint business park is just as important to the north as it is to the south. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
North Korea has slammed the Japanese government for police raids on a pro-Pyongyang group in Tokyo in connection with an investigation into the country's past abductions of Japanese nationals. North Korea says such moves make the prospects for bilateral talks impossible. Kwon So-ah reports.
Pyongyang isn't happy about the way Japan is investigating North Korea's abduction of Japanese nationals in the 1970s and 80s. The North State-run Korean Central News Agency reported Thursday that Pyongyang sent a letter to Japan denouncing raids on the General Association of Korean Residents in Japan, a pro-North Korean body that functions as the de facto North Korean embassy in Tokyo. Pyongyang called it a severely political provocation and an infringement of Pyongyang's sovereignty, and is not only seeking an explanation, but also an apology. The North Korean regime also accused Japan of, quote, playing up the abduction issue internationally. Last year, Japan and the EU submitted a draft resolution to the UN against North Korea's human rights abuses, including the matter of abductees. Relations between the two countries appear to be souring. This latest complaint comes less than a year after Pyongyang and Tokyo both agreed on investigations into the abduction issue at a meeting in Stockholm. Tokyo had lifted some sanctions in return for the probe, but so far North Korea hasn't delivered any results. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo with both.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics.
President Park Geun-hye is calling on Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to address the issue of Japan's wartime sexist enslavement of Korean women during his upcoming speech to U.S. Congress. Meeting in Seoul on Thursday, U.S. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi agreed with President Park, saying Japan needs to apologize for its wartime atrocities. Ji Myung-gil has more.
Nancy Pelosi called for Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to apologize for the Japanese military's coercion of young Korean and other Asian women into sexual slavery during World War II.
We have been clear about what we'd like to hear about comfort women. Whether the Prime Minister does that in that speech or not, I hope that a statement will be made.
It's an issue that Seoul has repeatedly pressed on Tokyo. During talks earlier with President Park Geun-hye, Pelosi expressed sympathy over the matter, saying it's a women's rights issue that should be solved. President Park pushed its urgency as the last surviving Korean victims are in their late 80s. Korea hopes to help U.S. lawmakers better understand the issue of Japan's wartime wrongdoings ahead of Abe's address to a joint session of the U.S. Congress. Diplomatic relations between Korea and Japan have been very tense, with the Abe administration reluctant to clearly acknowledge Japan's past. Seoul had criticized Abe for attempting to shift the blame for the forcible recruitment of the so-called comfort women to private brokers, denying the Japanese government's involvement. Pelosi and the other 9 members of Congress will head to Japan on Friday. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se also reportedly told Nancy Pelosi that the Japanese Prime Minister should specifically refer to Tokyo's past acknowledgement of its wartime sexual enslavement in its upcoming U.S. congressional speech. Seoul's foreign ministry said Yoon asked for Washington's support on the matter during his closed-door meeting with the U.S. House Minority Leader so that Abe's speech can send a positive message to Korea and other countries that were affected by Japan's imperialistic atrocities. It's the first time the Korean minister called for expressions such as Japan's past aggressions, colonial rule, and comfort women issue in regards to Abe's speech. Pelosi, however, is reported to have maintained a position that the inclusions are the Japanese leader's decision. The April 29th by-elections are fast approaching, and the main opposition party is facing tough competition from former party members in 2 of its traditional home turf districts. In Seoul's Kwanak B district, former senior advisor Chung Dong-young is running against the New Politics Alliance for Democracy candidate, splitting the liberal votes. According to an opinion poll conducted by 중앙일보 from March 31st to April 1st, nearly 35% said they would vote for the ruling party candidate Eoh Jin-joo in Gwanak-B. And in the Seoul district in Gwangju Jeollanam-do province, another former NPAD senior advisor Chun Jung-bae is also challenging the main opposition party candidate. Now, in this district, the survey showed that Chun running on independent was in the lead with nearly 30%.
Now, France's top appeals court has overturned a previous ruling that approved the extradition of the daughter of Yoo Byung-eun, the late owner of the Seoul Ho ferry that sank off Korea's southwest coast last April. Officials say Yoo Som-na's case will now be re-examined by a lower court. Yoo had filed an appeal against the extradition ruling in January, saying she wouldn't get a fair trial in Korea. Korean authorities say Yoo embezzled $45 million from subsidiaries owned by her family, including the ferry operator, the Cheonghaejin Marine Company. Korean prosecutors believe the alleged embezzlement contributed to safety defects that led to the ferry sinking. If extradited and convicted, the 48-year-old could face up to 45 years behind bars. Korea's foreign exchange reserves rose for the second straight month in March. The Bank of Korea says reserves came in at around $363 billion as of the end of last month. That's up $380 million from February. The central bank attributes the increase to a rise in investment profits that offset a drop in the value of euro-denominated assets. The euro slumped over 3%, in fact, against the greenback last month. Korea has the seventh largest foreign exchange reserves in the world, following China, Japan, Switzerland, and a few others. A market researcher is predicting that Samsung Electronics' new Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge smartphones will be record-breaking bestsellers for the Korean tech giant. Hong Kong-based Counterpoint Research says Samsung is expected to sell over 50 million combined units of the new smartphones this year, surpassing the record set by the Galaxy S4, which sold about 45 million units the year it was released. New features like wireless charging batteries, which is a first for the industry, are projected to help Samsung win back its share in the high-end smartphone market. However, the researcher said the boost will come at the expense of other Android competitors rather than its arch rival Apple. And despite its market share edging down, Samsung has retained its #1 spot with a 28% market share in the smartphone market last year, but Apple did outperform Samsung in the fourth quarter. The Seoul Motor Show kicked off on this Friday for a pretty long run, and automakers from around the world are rolling out new models and some interesting looking concept cars in the hopes of attracting potential buyers. For a peek into this event and the cars that are creating the major buzz, our Kim Min-ji reports.
Flashy and sleek take center stage at this year's Seoul Motor Show, with major brands pulling out all the stops. Under the theme Experience the Technology, Feel the Artistry, automakers are showcasing models that fuse cutting-edge trends with sophisticated designs. Eoh Motors pulled the curtain back on its much-anticipated revamped K5. The sedan is equipped with state-of-the-art tech, offering a safe drive and chic design that can appeal to drivers of all ages.
Cars are no longer limited to just the driving experience. It's a part of our everyday lives. Our focus was to make the car a part of the driver's lifestyle and culture.
Foreign brands are also making a big showing. Mini used the occasion to showcase its Mini Superleggera vision concept. It's gained attention for its roadster shape, unique styling, and classic interior. And riding on the environmentally friendly trend, a majority of local and foreign brands have also included green cars in their showcase lineup. BMW's i8 plug-in hybrid sports car made its local debut. The German car maker says it's a glimpse into the future and has even taken into consideration Korea's lack of infrastructure for such vehicles.
We've installed 120 charging facilities at supermarkets across the nation for customers to use.
More than 300 vehicles are on site, but if the showroom isn't enough, there's also a variety of hands-on activities visitors can check out, including driving simulations. The motor show runs through April 12th. 김민지, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the rest of the global headlines we're following on this Friday lunchtime. For that, we connect to Eunice Kim at the News Center.
Eunice, it was a day of complete horror for those in Kenya when a university campus was overtaken by a shooting by extremists. And although authorities have gotten a handle on the situation, the body count has unfortunately risen dramatically.
That's right, Mark. And according to government officials, it has risen to 147. That's 147 students and staff who were killed by militants identified as belonging to the Somali Islamist group Al-Shabab. It was a scene of complete chaos at Garissa University College in northeastern Kenya. Police and soldiers surrounded the college and exchanged gunfire throughout the day with the attackers who burst onto the campus earlier in the morning hours wearing suicide vests and carrying AK-47s. They also at one point took hostages. Authorities say all 4 gunmen have been killed. Kenya's Interior Ministry said the militants exploded like bombs as the confrontation ended. Nearly 600 students were rescued or escaped, 79 of them wounded. The government has identified the mastermind of the attack as a high-ranking Al-Shabab official named Mohammed Kuno. And a brazen prison break in Yemen, a country already dealing with a leadership vacuum amid a Houthi rebel takeover. Police and government officials say suspected Al-Qaeda fighters had attacked the central prison in the port city of Mukalla. Militants armed with machine guns and rocket fire surrounded the facility, freeing all 300 inmates. Sources say among them was a top provincial leader of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Khalid Sahid Patarfi. And finally, an update on the ongoing criminal probe on last week's Germanwings crash. Prosecutors in Germany say they found records of web searches on suicide and cockpit doors on a tablet computer belonging to co-pilot Andreas Lubitz.
According to the results, the user informed himself about medical treatments, as well as different kinds of, and the implementation of a suicide. On at least one day, he had searched for several minutes about cockpit doors and their safety precautions.
Investigators believe the 27-year-old had used the device between March 16th and 23rd before crashing the passenger plane one day later on the 24th. Based on this evidence, they say they believe Lubitz intentionally crashed Flight 9525 when he locked the pilot out of the cockpit and dialed in the premature descent, smashing the aircraft onto the mountainside. Meanwhile, a French prosecutor has announced that crews have finally found the second black box, the flight data recorder, adding he had reasonable hope it would provide useful information, though it was found blackened and burned.
Good afternoon. All the rain clouds have moved out from the peninsula, and misty and cloudy skies will turn to partly sunny skies. And we'll also have clean air to enjoy throughout the day today, and the top temperatures will be hovering in the upper teens to low 20s across the nation. So the daytime high here in the capital will rise to 17, while Gwangju and Busan will rise to 19 and 22 respectively. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 18, while Dokdo tops out at 16. Now we have one more round of spotty rain in the forecast starting tomorrow evening at about 6 p.m. and it will rain till early Sunday morning, but temperatures will continue to be on the mild side. Well, before I go, I'd like to let you know that I'll be moving to primetime news weather from next Monday, 10 p.m. Korea time, so I hope to see you then. On that note, here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, this is pretty much where we say goodbye on this Friday afternoon.
Well, today will be my last day behind the anchor desk, but Mark will continue to bring you news at the same time at noon Korea time on weekdays.
Yes, myself and all of the Newsline at Noon team are going to miss you an awful lot, but all our viewers out there, you'll still be able to hear Jin-joo's lovely voice on reports next week. And just to remind you then, as Jin-joo will not be joining me from next week, the format of our noon news is going to be changing a little bit from next Monday, but we will still be bringing you all the latest news out of Korea and beyond at this time. So with that, have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.